It was the summer of 2009 at Groom Lake, Nevada, inside the range most people pretend does not exist. I was 42 years old then. I had been on test programs for over a decade. Nothing about that morning felt special when I parked my truck and walked past the guard shack. The air was still, the sky was clean, the dry lake looked flat and empty like always. I was assigned to hangar 4 that week. My job was numbers and limits. I checked sensors. I signed forms. I watched machines behave. That aircraft arrived before sunrise under tarps and armed silence. No markings. No tail number. Just a shape that refused to settle in my eyes. When the ground power came on, I tasted metal at the back of my tongue. Not fear, not nerves, just metal. The concrete under my boots held a soft tremble, steady and patient. Tools left on a cart had shifted since the night before. No one mentioned it. I wrote the time. I wrote the location. I told myself it was another test. I stepped closer anyway, already knowing this day would not let me go. Before we start the video, hit the subscribe button to support the channel. After that first morning, the day settled into a rhythm that looked normal from the outside. Badge scans, long walks across concrete that baked by noon. I stayed in the same trailer with the same desk and the same view of the dry lake. The program had a bland name meant to slide off memory. It was listed as an Advanced Flight Systems Evaluation. No one said Area 51. We said the range. We said the site. Words mattered there. My role was narrow by design. I was responsible for validating sensor data before and after ground runs. Pressure, temperature, structural strain, timestamps across systems. I had done this work on stealth platforms and drones. The process was boring on purpose. You trusted boredom. It meant nothing was trying to surprise you. With this aircraft, boredom never arrived. Even when nothing was powered, the numbers did not rest the way they should. Baselines drifted a little overnight. Not enough to trip alarms, but enough to show intent, like a compass needle leaning in without a field. The aircraft stayed undercover most of the time. When they rolled it out for inspection, it sat low and plain, shaped like something a careful mind would design to avoid attention. No curves meant to impress. No sharp edges meant to scare. The skin was dull gray, not paint, not bare metal either. Panels met without screws or rivets. You could run a glove along the seams and feel nothing but a change in temperature. Cooler on one side than the other. That should not happen in open air. Inside the hangar, space felt tight in ways I could not map. I would measure a distance with a tape and then walk it and feel like I took one step too many. Doors look square, but your shoulder brushed the frame if you were not careful. I blamed fatigue. Long hours did that. Still, I marked it down in my personal notebook, not the official log. I had learned which questions stayed quiet if you wanted to keep working. The team was small, a mix of Air Force, contractors, and a few people whose background was never shared. Everyone was polite. Nobody joked much. We all felt watched, but not by cameras. It was the sense that the program itself noticed you. The test director kept his distance. He spoke clearly and rarely. When he did, people listened, not out of fear, but because he chose words like a man counting steps on thin ice. During the first full-powered ground run, the metallic taste came back stronger this time. It filled my mouth like I had bitten foil. My teeth hummed, not painfully, just aware. The vibration underfoot deepened, slow and even, like a large engine turning far away underground. Instruments showed nothing out of limit. Noise levels were low. Heat was minimal. On paper, it was a perfect run. In my body, it felt like standing too close to a storm you could not see. After shutdown, a pale dust clung to the lower edges of the airframe and the hangar floor beneath it. It looked like fine chalk. Maintenance swerved it without comment. I asked where it came from. A crew chief shrugged and said, "The desert gets everywhere." That answer did not fit, but I let it pass. Arguing with the desert is pointless, and arguing with a classified program is worse. At night, I lay in my bunk and replayed the numbers. Timestamps bother me most. Independent systems disagreed by fractions of a second, then corrected themselves. That happens with bad clocks or loose wiring. We checked both, swapped units, ran control tests with other aircraft. Only this platform showed the drift, always in the same direction, always during power transitions. Patterns like that mean something is pushing back. By the end of the first week, minor health issues started to appear. Headaches, dry noses. One man had a brief nosebleed during a run. Medical logged as dehydration. We drank more water. No one panicked. Soldiers and engineers are good at ignoring discomfort if the mission keeps moving. Still, I noticed how the birds avoided the airfield on test days. The sky stayed empty longer than usual, even for that place. I began to understand that we were not just testing an aircraft. We were testing how close we could stand to it while it worked. The limits were not written yet. We were part of that process, whether we agreed to it or not. Each evening as I left the hangar, the vibration faded from my feet, but the taste stayed with me until I slept. That told me the day was not done with me yet. By the second week, the aircraft stopped feeling new and started feeling familiar in the wrong way, like a place you return to in a bad dream. I knew which corner of the hangar stayed colder. I knew which lights flickered during power changes. I knew when the vibration would settle into my boots even before the system came alive. Familiarity did not bring comfort. It only sharpened what felt off. The program schedule tightened and the briefings grew shorter. Fewer questions were allowed. Fewer names were spoken. It felt like the work was speeding up because someone was afraid of slowing down. I spent most of my time at the instrumentation racks checking signal paths and logging comparisons between onboard sensors and external range wire, radar, optical tracking, passive receivers. The range had watched thousands of aircraft over the years. It knew how to see with this platform. The range struggled. Radar returns were clean one moment and soft the next, like the aircraft was choosing how solid it wanted to be. Optical feeds showed shape without depth, as if the air around it was flattening the image. None of this broke rules. It just bent them gently enough to stay legal. Conversations with co-workers stayed careful. We talked about weather. We talked about schedules. When someone drifted toward the aircraft itself, the talk died fast. One contractor, an older man with years in propulsion, quietly told me the power system was not an engine in the normal sense. He said it behaved more like a condition than a machine. The next day he was gone, reassigned, they said. His desk was cleared by lunch. No farewell, no explanation. The message was simple and clean. Security shifted, too. Badges were scanned more often. Escorts appeared where they had not been before. Phones were banned outright, even powered-down ones. Medical staff increased their presence during runs. They stood off to the side, watching us more than the aircraft. It made me feel like a variable instead of a witness. I kept my own notes tighter and smaller. I memorized what I could. Paper has a way of disappearing in places like that. One afternoon, while running a calibration check with the aircraft completely powered down, I noticed the clocks drift again. Just a little, enough to catch my eye. No power, no data flow, no reason for change. I ran the test again. Same result. The hangar felt quiet, but the vibration still pressed faintly through the floor like an echo that never learned to leave. I stood there longer than needed, staring at the fuselage and had the clear thought that it was not asleep. It was waiting. Health issues became harder to ignore. The headaches lasted longer. Sleep came thin and broken. A young technician fainted during a night shift and woke confused about where he was. Medical wrote it up as stress. Stress fits everything if you wanted to. I started noticing the pale dust more often, gathered in places that had been cleaned hours before. It stuck to skin and left a dry smell like old stone. Washing it off took effort. Late one evening, the test director called a closed meeting with a few of us. No slides, no handouts. He spoke plainly and said the next phase would involve higher energy states and reduced personnel on the floor. He said risks were understood and managed. He did not say safe. I asked about the clock drift and the range inconsistencies. He looked at me for a long moment and said some systems do not like being measured the same way twice. That was the closest thing to an answer I ever got. Walking back to my trailer that night, the desert felt wider than usual. The stars looked sharp and distant. My watch showed the right time, but I checked it twice anyway. I understood then that the program was moving towards something it could not fully predict and that my role was no longer just to observe but to stand close enough to record what happened when control slipped. That knowledge settled heavy and it followed me into the next morning. The next phase began without ceremony. No countdown, no speech about progress. We arrived one morning and found the hangar stripped down to essentials. Fewer carts, fewer tools, fewer people. The aircraft sat centered on the floor like it had claimed the space for itself. Power cables were already laid out. Medical staff stood farther back than before, quiet and alert. I took my place at the console and felt the familiar weight settle into my chest. The said,